All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. First, we want to thank you all for being here today. My name is Robert Wittenberg. I'm state representative for the 27th House District in Oakland County. I'm also the co-founder and the chair of our legislative Gun Violence Prevention Caucus. Today we're joined by members of our caucus and advocates from around the state. And we are not anti-gun, we are anti-gun violence. And we're here because after years of senseless and preventable tragedies, our families deserve the freedom to live without fear of gun violence. Together, we are working toward the goal of reducing gun violence in Michigan through sensible and data-driven public policies. We're here today to introduce one of those policies, the Extreme Risk Protection Order package of bills. And we have the lead sponsors here with us today, Senator Bayer, who will be speaking, Senator McMorrow and Senator Geis, as well as Representative Brixey. Representative Hoadley was unable to join us today. These bills will empower law enforcement and family members to prevent gun tragedies by giving them the tools they need to keep themselves and their families safe, by providing them with the legal recourse to limit access to guns for those proven to be at risk of endangering themselves or others. Red flag legislation, as it's referred to in 11 other states where it's on the books, is a meaningful first step toward preventing gun violence right here in Michigan. This is about protecting our families and our children while still respecting the rights of law-abiding gun owners. And make no mistake, this legislation can and will have a direct impact on the safety of our children and our families. The data has shown this. In the first 14 years of its implementation in Connecticut, studies show that for every 10 to 20 risk warrants that are served, one suicide was prevented. More than 1,000 Michiganders lose their lives to suicide each year, with gun deaths accounting for more than 60%. And as we reflected recently on the one-year anniversary of the tragic shooting at Parkland at Marjory Stoneman Douglas, it is important to consider what we could have done differently. A common theme in many of the mass shootings of the past decade has been the chilling hindsight detailed by those who know the shooters. The warning signs, the history of abuse, the pattern of disturbing behavior, they were all there. Yet there was no legal framework in place to allow those around them to step in before it was too late. With extreme risk protection orders, family members would have the ability to intervene before tragedy strikes. Too many of our loved ones, our friends, and our neighbors fall victim to gun violence every single day. These long overdue sensible bills will finally give us the recourse to actually do something about it and save countless innocent lives in the process. We always tell people, if you see something, say something. With these bills, we will be able to do something. With that, I'm now going to pass it over to our lead sponsor in the Senate, Senator Rosemary Bayer.
Thank you, Representative Wittenberg. I represent the 12th District in Oakland County, and I'm here today to talk about suicide prevention. In Oakland County, suicide is the second leading cause of death for people from ages 10 to 24. Across the country, 2/3 of our firearm deaths are suicide. Tragically, our gun suicide rate in this country is 8 times that of other high-income countries. 90% of suicide attempts with a gun result in death. In contrast, over 90% of people who attempt suicide by any other means survive, because there's time to think it over. Time to talk to someone, time to change your mind, and most other methods are not as lethal. So here's the thing. I'm here because I grew up in a hunting family. I have close relatives who have a rifle in their pickup truck because there may be dinner nearby. This is Michigan. This is like a normal thing in Michigan. But when I was a teenager, I suddenly grew up a lot faster when my friend, my boy next door friend, committed suicide with a gun. And I will never forget the devastation to my family, to his family, to the community, to the school. None of us will ever forget that. No matter how long ago that was, we'll never forget that. Access to a gun triples the risk of death by suicide. Sorry. If we could just slow things down a little bit, just to reduce a suicidal person's access to firearms in the moment, that will save lives. And saving lives is the purpose of this legislation. If we work together to adopt this common sense solutions, we can begin to address the many factors that result in gun-related suicides. This is about protecting individuals, families, children, and about respecting the rights of gun owners. This is the time, the right time, for a legal framework that will ensure people get the help they need in the moment. Yeah. And keep themselves and our community safe. So I want to thank everyone who's here today as we take this step forward. And I look forward to working with all of my colleagues in the legislature and the governor's office and throughout the state to make sure our communities are safe and residents get the help when they need it in the moment. Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Jonathan Gold of the Michigan chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Thanks very much for having me. This is obviously a topic that's near and dear to my heart and the heart of pediatricians in Michigan who care for kids. Kids, unfortunately, are bear the brunt of all of the gun violence that occurs. You know, a quarter of victims of gun violence from mass shootings are kids, and that's significant. And you know, as we just heard talked about, you know, there's often a warning sign, and kids can be protected from that. So that's something that's really important for us. I hear, you know, more and more now from kids who have to go through these lockdown drills in school, which is just heartbreaking for me. That's part of their daily life now. I remember fire drills when I was a kid, and now they're gun safety drills. You know, that's what they lock down the schools, and that's something that's really heartbreaking. I think anything we can do to kind of prevent that. But as we just talked about, you know, mass shootings are just a small piece of the issues around gun violence. Suicide and homicide are also directly connected, and really sort of kids are the major victims of those tragedies as well. And one thing is very clear, which is that access to guns is the major sort of factor in whether those wind up in tragedy or don't wind up in tragedy, which is why I think that these bills that we're talking about today are common sense. They help protect kids. They help protect families, and they do so in a measured way that really is something that I think that we can all get behind. You know, I think that all of us in Michigan really support the idea of common sense solutions to reduce gun violence, and that's why we're here today. So, thanks very much for having me. I'd like to introduce Emily Durbin from Moms Demand Action.
Thanks so much. I'm representing the Michigan chapter of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense America, our members all across the state and our 13 local groups, and here to remind us all that gun violence is devastating, it's all too common, and it is preventable. In times of risk and crisis, access to firearm can turn a threat into a tragedy. People who are closest to those at risk can often see the warning signs when there's still a chance to intervene. We know the red flag laws save lives, and we are immensely grateful to the sponsors here today of this legislation for their work to help make our community safer. Our members in Moms Demand Action, mothers, fathers, gun owners, and survivors of gun violence will be out in force all across our state to encourage our elected officials to pass these important measures. And I encourage anyone who would like to hear some personal stories of folks who've been directly impacted by gun violence for whom this legislation could be very meaningful to speak with some of our members and survivors afterwards who are here with us today. Thank you.
And just the last thing, this is on the books, like we said, in 11 other states, and this has gone through with bipartisan support in those states. We have, at the federal level, Republican and Democratic congressional and senators that have introduced this, including Senator Marco Rubio from Florida. Here in our state, we had a bipartisan package with Congressman Upton and Congresswoman Dingell that worked on it. So this should not be a partisan issue. So we look forward to working with our colleagues on both sides of the aisle and with the governor to pass this legislation.